A well-to-do man is shocked to learn that his only daughter is living in poverty in an old caravan with her twin babies. He rushes to her rescue without realizing that this will be the last time in his life. It might make them smile and motivate them to do well. A crucial lesson is waiting for you at the conclusion of the film. So pay attention. A clinking sound split the calm in Ben Doyle's large estate. As he began to cut into his steak and taste the first bite of the tender meat. Every evening, he reached for the TV remote and switched to the state news station. Ben had no relatives. So he ate dinner by himself while watching the news. He was having trouble. So his ex-wife, Cindy, departed years ago, taking their only daughter, Leah. Ben tried starting his own business and took on odd jobs. But all of his attempts ended in failure. Cindy got a divorce from him and wed a wealthy man in search of a better life. Ben was unable to obtain custody of Leah due to his unstable financial situation. Ben wanted to be in touch with Leah. So he gave her gifts every year on her birthday. But Ben lost contact with Leah after Cindy and her new husband moved to a distant state. Cindy blocked him from contacting Leah and disregarded his calls and texts despite his attempts to get in touch. Ben was alone and unwanted. So he put all of his energy into his work and worked until he was rich. Ben felt unsatisfied without deep ties. Even with his newfound fortune, celebrity, and opulent lifestyle. Every night when he returned home, no one was there to greet him. Every day he went to bed, watched TV, and had dinner by himself. This existence was not what he had imagined. One day, Ben was watching TV when a report on women's empowerment from the news channel aired. It included interviews with women from a variety of backgrounds, including the impoverished. Ben was disinterested in the show and wondered why. There wasn't more breaking news or whether they had better stories to cover. He was grousing as he went for the remote to flip the station. But paused when he discovered that Lee, his daughter, was the next subject the reporter interviewed. His amazement and incredulity grew. Ben watched the story, his eyes welling with grief, learning that his daughter and her twins were living in an old caravan. What brings her here? How is it possible for her to merely... As Leah's address flashed at the bottom of the screen, Ben murmured to himself. He was in his car the next second, typing the address onto Google Maps. Ben was filled with concerns, wondering why Leah was still in town when she was supposed to have moved to another state with Cindy. After driving as fast as he could, he pulled up in front of the rundown caravan seemingly hours later. He could only about make out its state in the nighttime dark. He banged on the door, tears running down his face. Lee responded after a few minutes, startled to see him. She cried out, "Dad! Oh God! What happened to you?" Ben gave Leah a strong hug and said, "Lee, what happened to you? What brings you here? If you were having trouble, why didn't you get in touch with me?" "Enough, Dad," Leah said as she pushed him away. "The one who abandoned us was you. Are you forgetting? Mom filled me in on everything. You loved your business and work. Thus you never wanted us. What's the current purpose of it all? Is that what Cindy told you?" Ben asked, looking horrified. "Are you really so certain about that?" "Obviously, Mom. I think so," Lee answered. "She was by my side all the time while you weren't. If you give me a chance to explain myself." "Honey, I want to tell you that it's not the truth," Ben said, shaking his head. "It's not. Are you certain? All these years. Where have you been?" Please allow me to sit down before I begin. Ben moaned. I'm tired. Lee let him into the caravan by opening the door a larger distance. Ben felt awful when he saw the twins curled up in the middle of the tiny room on an old bed. I hope you take all those negative things about me out of your head before I tell you my side of the story, he added, perched on a stool. In actuality, Leah, your mother moved to a new state with you when you were 10 years old. I never was able to get in touch with her. I used to send you tons of things every year. Lee jumped in, asking, what gifts? When Ben realized Cindy hadn't allowed Leah to keep those gifts, he moaned. He pulled up images from his phone, sharing every fleeting moment he loved about her. Every little memory I have of you is stored on my phone, including the photos we took and the gifts I gave you. Every time I'm missing you, I glance at it. Every year I used to give you gifts, but I was unable to get in touch with you after you moved to a different state. It was while watching the news today that I learned about you. But what happened to you? Honey? What are you doing here exactly? Lee's tears had no boundaries by now. It had been her father that had misled her. Dad. I really apologize. My stepfather remarried after his mother passed away from cancer a few years ago. I was seeing a guy who, after making promises that he would land a decent job and that we would start a family here, brought me here. We did establish a family. But one day he suddenly vanished and was never seen again. I could only make it on my own if I did this. I support my girls by working as a tailor. Listen, Leah. We can't change what happened in the past, but we can improve our future, Ben remarked while holding her hands. I'm bringing your kids along as well. My daughter cannot continue to live this way. Please. This isn't what you deserve. Dad. I have no idea what to say. I really apologize. Maybe I ought to have tried to contact you sooner. I sincerely apologize. Lee said. His words were, it's okay, honey. And he gave her a hug. I love you no matter what. Dad. I also adore you. Again. I apologize. Ben offered Lee a prominent job in his company when she moved in. But Lee turned him down. She wanted to establish a reputation for herself since she was motivated by Ben's success. She praised him for being the best grandfather to his twin girls and for his support and shelter. Leah was interning part-time at Ben's company and learning the fundamentals of business from him with the goal of making him proud. Whether Lee became a huge success or not, in the end she and Ben were happy. And the twins had a supervising grandfather. Nothing felt more precious at the end of the day than a contented family. That's all about the first story. Now let's watch another similar story. They bought an old house in a village from a young girl. Tears were unavoidable once inside. Everyone wants to own a home in the country for their latter years in retirement, especially after living in a busy metropolis. After realizing your long-awaited dream and entering the house, you come across something so shocking that it breaks your heart. This tells Manuel and Estrellas' story. At the age of 18, Manuel Gonzalez, a devoted husband and professional locksmith, tied the knot with Estrella, Jose and Ana. Their 2 children were born from their union as a result of their love. Estrella relocated with her parents at a young age in search of a better future. She was born and raised in a little village in the country. They got together in their teens, and she ended up being Manuel's lifelong partner. Their family was like a family on a TV show. Before dusk, Manuel would come home from work to happy yells, embraces, and kisses from the kids. After bringing him food, Estrella would come out of the kitchen to greet him with a kiss. After sharing their day, they would watch TV together before turning in for the evening. Their marriage was thriving. They had a wonderful family. A happy father who had a good career, definite goals, and, most importantly, a great deal of love for their family. All seemed perfect. A clever and well-mannered youngster. A loving mother to the house and children. However, fairy tales frequently take strange turns and become nightmares, worthy of a horror film. The Gonzalez family went as usual on a Sunday in May, spending time in the mountains, beaches, and forests. They loved spending family Sundays somewhere quiet and uncrowded. By the city, where they would have picnics, take pictures, play ball, and have bonfires. They continued to rejoice in the woodland that was outside the city. While the kids engaged in play, Manuel uncorked a bottle of wine and they raised a toast to life. Their sense of time was warped by the effects of the drink and their intense love for one another. Until an unexpected interruption broke the spellbinding moment. They were living in the name of love. "It's getting dark. Where are the kids?" Manuel cried out in alarm. Regaining his composure quickly, he became aware that it was a long time since he had heard them. The formerly happy parents were suddenly upset as Ana and Jose, who had gone from cloud 9 to a terrible plummet, started screaming in distress. A week was spent thoroughly scouring and sifting over the region by volunteers, police, and rangers. Devastated but tenacious, the parents held on to hope that their two small children would still be alive. When they tried to get some rest at their now-forgotten home a week and 3 days later, they received the heartbreaking news that no parent should have to bear. Jose had been discovered passing away in the bottom of a gully near to a creek. The normal noises of everyday joy were replaced with screams, resonating throughout the house. A dramatic and melancholic image was painted by the sounds of objects crashing against walls and floors and cries of desperation. In the midst of the mental turmoil and suffering, a more sinister query lingered. Where was Ana? The crew responsible for finding Jose's remains said that they had only uncovered a girl's shoe as a trace. Nothing turned up despite looking all the way to the river mouth, though there were hints that she might be stuck at the bottom, wrapped in unreachable algae. Her passing away was assumed given the amount of time that had gone. They were in shock to learn that their two children had lost life as a result of their fleeting amorous impulse. They insisted that there be no other attendants at the funeral. It was only interrupted for a few hours by their mutual anguish and their presence. That sad tale ended with a little urn and a black box containing Anna's little shoe. Nothing stayed the same, as one could assume. The gap between the building's former Romeo and Juliet grew. The house was first filled with a somber silence, which was soon broken up by conflicts about insignificant things like dirty dishes, snoring, and loud eating. In the end, a big disagreement surfaced. Manuel claimed that keeping any trace of their children would simply make their suffering worse. Estrella objected, saying those were their only remaining belongings. At that point, things got really serious. All of them were accused of being careless, drunk, not paying attention to the passing of time, and letting the kids go too far. In a house that had once been the setting for a fantastical love tale, the term hatred quickly spread. The now depressing words, "Everything is your fault because you didn't die instead of them," kept repeating in the home. Every now and then, they sat together on the bunk where the kids used to sleep, and gave each other hugs as tears welled up in their lifeless eyes. They would eventually part ways and go to bed. Whereas Estrella stayed mostly indoors and seldom left the house. Manuel gave his work his wholehearted attention. When she did, she had an elusive appearance and was difficult to identify due to her clothing. She took her housework very seriously at times. And others she neglected it altogether. These actions were caused by the deep despair that was consuming her. Manuel usually ignored these signals, coming home just to eat and sleep. He slept in the guest room now that they were no longer in the same bed. Frequently, he would discover Estrella introspecting or meandering through the home, wondering, "What am I doing here?" The tipping point was reached when she accused him of stealing items that were subsequently discovered in the same location, such as pairs of shoes kept in the refrigerator. Manuel was too preoccupied with his own suffering to notice these items. Up till the day he tiredly went back home, murmuring as usual. Estrella was doing the dishwashing. Manuel lifted a glass and flinched away, seeing something oily on it. He reached for another, unscathed, but it was covered in the same oily layer. It happened with both plates and utensils. Startled to discover Estrella scrubbing dishes while holding a piece of gammon, he walked over to her. He said, bewildered, "Estrella, what the hell are you doing?" "Because the abbot with ham," she said coolly, carrying on with her task. "Ham?" Astonished, Estrella glanced at the slice she was holding in response. "This is soap." "Manuel." Startled, Manuel connected the phonemes of jamon, ham, with jabin, soap. His gut told him to get Estrella checked out right away. And the diagnosis, Alzheimer's, confirmed his suspicions. As Manuel plunged into a chasm, the earth appeared to open up beneath him. That this was also happening was beyond his comprehension. He questioned why he had stopped giving his wife attention and held himself responsible for the bad things that were happening to their house. For a moment, he considered suicide as a solution. But his conscience kept him from acting on it. Unsettling events happened as he started to remember and let down the wall he had constructed around his feelings for the love of his life. Estrella got the kids ready for nighttime and summoned them to dinner. Not only was there tragedy with their children, their house, and his wife, but now she was acting as though the kids were still alive. And for Manuel, this was all a living hell. As Manuel realized how sensitive the situation was, he started showing Estrella more love and attention. But this seems to set off a peculiar reaction in Estrella's mind. She withdrew to the children's earlier years, using it as a barrier between them and the terrible world they were currently experiencing. Manuel wanted to deal with Estrella's Alzheimer's disease and its severe repercussions, but he was struggling to find a good answer. Manuel ultimately came to the conclusion that it was best to start over for the sake of both of them. Should make an effort to block out the unpleasant memories and commit to taking care of his wife through her final days. The house, which had held both happy and sad memories, was no longer able to provide comfort. He made the decision to leave, even leaving the city, in an effort to start over. His first aim from the start of his marriage was to look up house prices in remote areas away from the hustle and bustle of the city. He had no idea how things would turn out this way. He evaluated his lifetime savings, did some math, and sold stuff he didn't need before setting out to find a new place to live. After much looking about, talking to Estrella's physician, and giving it some serious thought, he discovered precisely what he had imagined. An old house up for sale in a far-off town. He told Estrella they were leaving after making all the required preparations and said, "We won't be long." to the empty house. He gave it one last look and shut the door. His heart as empty as the home. As they drove to their new home, Manuel spoke with Grace in the car. She showed him where the old house that would serve as their new haven was. From the window, Estrella observed a wooded clearing during the trip and proposed that we should bring the children here. Manuel said nothing, knowing exactly where they were going to pass. In the end, they arrived at their goal by following the owner's directions. As they parked beside the ancient house, they were greeted by a happy girl who was genuinely smiling and listening to the sound of the motor. She gave a formal introduction of herself as Maria before going inside and gave the reason behind her desire to move to the city after her parents passed away. She started to cry because they were the only people who could comfort her at trying times. Manuel told their story quickly, highlighting Estrella's condition. Taking note of the circumstances, Maria graciously offered them the furniture and said she had some packing to do before inviting them in for a snack. Manuel followed Maria inside with little enthusiasm for following protocol because he was bored with formalities and just wanted to be in his new house. They discovered the house furnished as agreed with upon entering with Estrella. Everything was a little worn out, but it didn't matter. Manuel looked around while Maria went to get some cookies from the kitchen. All of a sudden, there was a scream in the house from Estrella. And then she started crying uncontrollably. Manuel rushed to her side, shocked by what had completely shaken his wife. Estrella pointed to a picture on a shelf next to the lost shoe, tears welling up from her soul. The cry startled Maria, who moved closer and saw what the pair was witnessing. "That's the only memory I have of my origins," she clarified. "This picture was in one of my pockets when my adoptive parents discovered me strolling around in only one shoe." Estrella's expressions changed, showing emotions she hadn't seen in a while. Manuel questioned if she had a red mole on her left ankle, stuttering in shock. Maria, uneasy, verified this at the very moment Estrella said, "Anna, my daughter." Tears and bewilderment filled their eyes as they both ran to embrace her. Maria, who was now called Anna, was unable to understand what was going on. The wife told all that had happened that fateful day, including what had happened to her brother and the shoe, the only object that had appeared, in a weird, mystical, tender, and perplexing turn of events. Anna described being lost and disoriented, only having one shoe on, and not knowing who she was or how she got there. She was discovered by a couple on the road, who took her to the town police station and asked her questions that she was unable to respond to. They were informed that there was no missing girls file and that the only cases comparable to theirs concerned youngsters whose bodies were discovered. The couple, unsure of what to do and facing the possibility of having to send her to an orphanage, chose to adopt her and falsify the town's civil registration to make it appear as though she was their biological daughter. They gave her the name Maria at her baptism. Manuel realized that the town's cops were completely incompetent and in a state of disarray. Manuel seems a little taken aback after they had a long talk in which they had discussed every aspect of her life, in addition to the nearly amazing reunion with his daughter. Estrella started talking and remembering things as if Alzheimer's had never occurred. One of the most significant reunions in the region took place, and Manuel and Estrella's story ended bittersweetly, because they were never able to reunite with their son, Jose. And now that Amarilla has discovered her origins, there's hope for her. She knows, in some way, that her parents set an example of love and commitment for her throughout her life. whether or not they were related to her. Maria currently leads a quite quiet life in the townhouse with her true parents. The three of them are adjusting to the dramatic turn their lives have taken. And they continue their weekly ritual of taking a ride in the old automobile on the weekends. Which dates back to when Maria was still going by Anna.